What if one of philosophy's oldest questions was never really about justice alone? Plato begins the Republic by asking what justice is, but the question quickly expands. It reaches into education, desire, political power, reason, knowledge, appearance, tyranny, death, and ultimately the good. And beneath all of it is another question. What should govern the human being? Plato looked deeply into the structure of the soul and concluded that reason must rule. Unified theistic naturalism asks whether reason itself can carry conditioning, memory, identity, fear, and inherited assumptions, and whether something conditioned can ever become the final navigator merely by becoming more refined. That brings us to the central encounter of this paper. Plato searches for the good. Unified theistic naturalism proposes the unwavering line of the divine. Plato gives us the cave. UTN asks what projector keeps producing the shadows. Plato shows us the tyrant who believes he is free. UTN asks what conditioned movement taught captivity to feel like freedom. This paper is called The Good, the Conditioned Mind, and the Unwavering Line. Reopening Plato's Republic through Unified Theistic Naturalism. It is a condensed companion to the larger philosophical monograph, Dear Plato. After 24 centuries, the conversation is not over. So let us look closely at the points where Plato's questions remain alive, and where another layer may now be visible. I'm Patrick Carradine, and this is Unified Theistic Naturalism. Abstract Plato's Republic remains one of the most influential philosophical examinations of justice, education, political order, psychological structure, knowledge, desire, tyranny, and the good. Its central inquiry repeatedly moves between the city and the individual, asking what governs human action and what makes justice intelligible beyond convention, reputation, appetite, and power. This white paper offers a condensed, unified theistic naturalism response to that inquiry and serves as a companion to the philosophical monograph, Dear Plato. After 24 centuries, the conversation is not over. Rather than reproduce the full book-by-book treatment of the Republic, it focuses on several central intersections: justice and the need for reference, the Ring of Gyges, education and human formation, the philosopher-king, the conditioned mind, Plato's divided line, the allegory of the cave, the form of the good, tyranny, political movement, and the question of the final navigator. The central UTN contribution is the conditioned mind, the accumulated architecture of memory, interpretation, inherited pattern, continuity, projection, identity, and learned response through which present experience is often filtered. Plato sees appetite, spirit, reason, images, political degeneration, and tyranny. UTN asks what history and conditioning may be moving beneath those structures. A second major point of comparison concerns reference. Plato's philosophy culminates in the good as the highest condition of intelligibility and value. Unified theistic naturalism proposes the unwavering line of the divine, expressed through freedom, unconditional love, compassion, stillness, truthfulness, non-duality, and wholeness. These concepts are not treated as identical. Their philosophical kinship lies in the recognition that changing opinion cannot become the final measure of justice. The decisive disagreement concerns governance. Plato seeks the rightly ordered soul under reason. UTN asks whether reason itself can be conditioned and proposes communion as the cessation of conditioned interference occupying center frame. Reason remains indispensable, but as instrument rather than final authority. This paper therefore does not reject Plato. It extends the inquiry into conditioned movement, participation, communion, and the need for an unwavering reference. I, justice, and the need for reference. The opening books of the Republic place several definitions of justice on the table. Cephalus associates justice with honesty and repayment. Polemarchus connects it with helping friends and harming enemies. Thrasymachus cuts through both with the claim that justice is simply the advantage of the stronger. Thrasymachus matters because his challenge remains permanent. If justice has no reference beyond the person or institution powerful enough to define it, then justice becomes unstable. A government can legalize oppression. A culture can normalize domination. A majority can approve injustice. A religion can sanctify hierarchy. A philosopher can rationalize coercion. Power does not become justice merely because it succeeds. Plato spends the rest of the Republic searching for something stronger than convention. He moves from law to character, from character to knowledge, and from knowledge toward the good. Unified theistic naturalism begins from the same pressure. If all judgment moves, then something is required against which movement can be observed. UTN names that reference the unwavering line of the divine expressed through freedom, unconditional love, compassion, stillness, truthfulness, non-duality, wholeness. These are not offered merely as moral slogans. They function as reference. Coercion becomes visible relative to freedom. Deception becomes visible relative to truthfulness. Possession becomes visible relative to unconditional love. Fragmentation becomes visible relative to wholeness. The important point is not that humans suddenly become perfect judges. The point is the opposite. The reference is not supposed to belong to the judge. The judge remains a participant. The ruler remains a participant. The philosopher remains a participant. The author remains a participant. No human interpreter becomes the line. 2. Gyges and Justice without surveillance Glaucon's Ring of Gyges asks a simple and disturbing question. What would a person do if no one could see them? The ring grants invisibility. Social punishment disappears. Reputation disappears. Observation disappears. If morality depends upon surveillance, invisibility becomes a test. UTN changes the location of the problem. Visibility does not determine what movement is. If an invisible person deceives, deception does not become truthfulness. If an invisible person steals, theft does not become generosity. If an invisible person coerces, coercion does not become freedom. The ring removes witnesses. It does not remove participation. This leads to a deeper question. Many people behave morally because they are maintaining an image of themselves. I am a good person. I am honest. I am spiritual. I am rational. I am compassionate. That self-image can become another witness. The person may refuse harmful conduct not because the movement is clearly seen, but because the act would threaten the identity they are protecting. Now the audience has simply moved inward. This is where UTN distinguishes manufactured virtue from communion. Manufactured virtue depends upon maintaining a moral image. Communion does not require the image. The movement itself does not depart from freedom, truthfulness, compassion, or wholeness. Gyges therefore asks whether justice survives invisibility. UTN adds, what remains when neither punishment nor identity is governing the action? 3. Education and the manufactured human Plato understood that education forms the person before the person learns to examine what formed them. Stories matter. Music matters. Heroes matter. Rewards matter. Punishments matter. Cultural assumptions matter. Children absorb before they analyze. That insight remains powerful. The difficulty appears when education becomes a mechanism for constructing the correct person. If conditioning is part of the problem, then better conditioning cannot automatically become the final solution. There is no escape from formation. Every child learns language, customs, history, social expectations, and ways of interpreting the world. The question is whether education leaves the participant capable of examining those inheritances. Unified theistic naturalism, therefore, shifts emphasis toward observation. Teach the student to distinguish event from interpretation. Teach the difference between evidence and inference. Teach how identity enters perception. Teach how memory influences expectation. Teach how repeated narratives become assumptions. Teach that uncertainty is sometimes the most truthful position available. Teach the student to question the framework that taught them. Otherwise, education becomes another cave. Plato wants education to orient the human being toward the good. UTN asks one additional question. Can the student remain capable of recognizing when education itself becomes conditioning? IV. The conditioned mind beneath Plato's soul Plato famously distinguishes reason, spirit, and appetite, and argues that justice in the individual depends upon proper order among them. UTN does not need to reject that model to ask what each faculty may be carrying. Appetite can carry history. Anger can carry history. Fear can carry history. Reason can carry history. A person can reason brilliantly from unexamined assumptions. The conditioned mind refers to the accumulated structure through which the present is interpreted using memory, inherited pattern, learned response, identity, reward, punishment, continuity, and projection. The distinction matters because conditioning can operate through intelligence just as easily as through desire. Plato sees appetite. UTN asks what conditioned appetite is carrying. Plato sees anger. UTN asks what history organizes the anger. Plato sees reason. UTN asks what assumptions structure the reasoning. Plato sees political decline. UTN asks what continuity makes the decline recognizable. Plato sees shadows. UTN asks what projector keeps producing them. This does not make thought an enemy. Memory is useful. Reason is useful. Planning is useful. Language is useful. The problem arises when instrument becomes ruler. The conditioned mind may perform an indispensable function without being qualified to become final authority. V. The philosopher-king and the brilliant mind Plato's philosopher-king is more sophisticated than the caricature of the smartest person should rule. His philosopher is trained toward truth rather than reputation, knowledge rather than opinion, and the good rather than appetite or personal advantage. The political concern is legitimate. Who should rule? The ambitious, the wealthy, the charismatic, the military, the majority, the religious authority, the technical expert? Every answer contains risk. Plato concludes that rulers must understand what is truly good. UTN agrees that expertise and wisdom matter, but adds another question. What occupies center frame? A highly intelligent person may still be governed by fear. A philosopher may still be governed by identity. A scholar may still be governed by resentment. A ruler may sincerely believe domination is benevolence. A person can possess extraordinary knowledge while remaining deeply conditioned. Intelligence magnifies whatever it serves. If compassion is present, intelligence may serve compassion. If domination is present, intelligence can make domination more efficient. If fear is present, intelligence can design elaborate structures of control. If identity is present, intelligence can become defense. Knowledge, therefore, does not equal freedom. This is why UTN does not answer Plato with a UTN philosopher-king. The founder of a framework is not entitled to govern because he founded it. The person most fluent in communion is not therefore the least conditioned. The scholar has expertise, but not ontological superiority. No one owns the line. That distinction matters because every framework risks becoming what it originally questioned. Inquiry can become identity. Identity can become hierarchy. Hierarchy can become protection of the institution. Then the framework stops examining reality and begins defending itself. Communificus is intended to keep the field larger than the framework. VI, the divided line, the cave, and the projector Plato's divided line and the UTN unwavering line sound similar linguistically, but they perform different philosophical functions. Plato's divided line organizes levels of cognition and reality. Images and visible things occupy the lower levels. Mathematical reasoning rises higher. Dialectical understanding moves toward the forms. The structure asks, how are we seeing, and what is the object of that cognition? The UTN unwavering line is not a hierarchy of knowledge. It is a reference against which movement can be recognized. Interpretation moves. Culture moves. Memory moves. Projection moves. Emotion moves. Law moves. Opinion moves. The line does not. The deeper meeting point therefore lies not between the two lines, but between Plato's good and UTN's unwavering line. Before reaching that comparison, the cave adds something essential. Plato's prisoners mistake shadows for reality. UTN sees a parallel in the conditioned mind. The mind produces images of self, other, relationship, future, betrayal, God, success, justice, and danger. Then the participant may respond to the image rather than the present event. The cave is therefore not only external, it can be carried. A person can change religions and carry the projector, change politics and carry it, change politics and carry it, change relationships and carry it, change philosophies and carry it, even leave one identity and construct another with the same mechanism. This is one of the most useful extensions of Plato's metaphor. Leaving the cave does not guarantee the projector was left behind. 7. The good and the unwavering line, Plato's good is not ordinary goodness. It functions as the highest principle within his metaphysical architecture. the condition through which intelligibility, truth, and value become possible. UTN's Unwavering Line arises from a different framework. It is proposed as a fixed divine reference expressed through the 7 attributes. The two should not be identified. Plato's good belongs to the metaphysics of forms. UTN's line belongs to a participatory metaphysics of communion and movement, but both answer a similar pressure. If every standard moves with culture, memory, preference, and power, what allows justice to remain more than local agreement? Plato refuses to let opinion become the final measure. UTN refuses to let conditioning become the final measure. That is the point of convergence. The disagreement concerns how reference is known and how the individual participates in it. Plato develops philosophical assent toward knowledge of the good. UTN proposes communion with the unwavering line. This difference becomes decisive. Plato elevates reason. UTN restores reason to instrument. Plato asks how the soul should be governed. UTN asks whether conditioned governance itself can cease. Plato seeks rightly ordered movement. UTN asks whether movement can arise without conditioned interference. 8. Tyranny, choice, and triangulation, books 8 and IX, are among Plato's sharpest psychological observations. The tyrant appears free because external restraint is weak, yet internally he is ruled by appetite. What looks like freedom becomes bondage. UTN makes a similar distinction between choice and freedom. A person may choose without external coercion and still act from conditioning. Fear may choose. Identity may choose. Reward history may choose. Familiarity may choose. Trauma may choose. The person experiences the action as mine, yet much of the architecture was already present before the decision. Triangulation gives UTN a way to describe this movement. Interpretation tells us what meaning is being assigned. Continuity reveals what pattern has been repeating. Projection reveals what future the conditioned mind expects from that pattern. Together they disclose trajectory. But trajectory is not destiny. That distinction is crucial. A relationship may have a trajectory. A political movement may have a trajectory. A habit may have a trajectory. A fear may have a trajectory. The person is not the trajectory. Conditioning can be profound without becoming metaphysical identity. UTN's claim is that communion interrupts conditioned continuation. The past explains. It does not become sovereign. This is where Plato's tyrant and UTN's conditioned mind meet strongly. The tyrant is not free simply because no one else is controlling him. He may be the most controlled person in the city. Ike's. Reason and the final navigator, Plato places reason in the governing position. Unified theistic naturalism asks whether reason can completely verify its own freedom from conditioning. Reason works with premises. Premises can be inherited. Language can be inherited. Categories can be inherited. Identity can influence what evidence is admitted. Fear can influence what outcomes are considered acceptable. A brilliant argument may still protect a conditioned conclusion. This does not diminish reason. It locates it. Reason remains indispensable. The issue is final authority. If reason cannot guarantee its own freedom from conditioning, what becomes the final navigator? Intuition is insufficient because intuition can be conditioned. emotion is insufficient because emotion can be conditioned. Conscience is insufficient because conscience may be culturally formed. Claims of revelation conflict. UTN proposes communion. Within this framework, communion is the condition in which conditioned interference no longer governs center frame. Reason remains available. Memory remains available. Emotion remains available. The mind remains a tool, but it is no longer automatically sovereign. When action arises from this condition, UTN calls it perfect action. Perfect does not mean flawless outcome. It does not mean omniscience. It does not mean universal approval. It means the action arises from communion rather than conditioned interference. When no deliberate action is required, UTN uses resonant flow. This shifts the ethical question. Instead of beginning only with, "What should I do?" UTN asks, "From where is the doing arising?" X. Government, justice, and the limits of systems, Plato seeks the just city. UTN does not propose a final political system. A democracy can oscillate. A monarchy can oscillate. A capitalist system can oscillate. A socialist system can oscillate. A religious system can oscillate. A secular system can oscillate. Labels do not guarantee alignment. That does not make institutions irrelevant. Rights matter. Courts matter. Transparency matters. Checks on power matter. Social protections matter. Economic structures matter. Laws matter. But no system becomes self-purifying because it carries the correct name. Conditioned participants still inhabit it. This is where communificus offers a different political posture. Instead of asking only, which system is finally correct, ask, what movement is occurring through this system? Does it preserve freedom? Does it rely upon deception? Does it institutionalize domination? Does it protect dignity? Does it produce fragmentation? Does it allow correction? Does it turn itself into identity? The system remains observable. Nothing human becomes the unwavering line. Exi. The myth of and the question of death Plato closes the Republic with the myth of The circle returns to justice. Gyges asked what happens when earthly witnesses disappear. Expands the horizon beyond earthly judgment. Souls encounter consequence and choose future lives. The philosophical structure is more important than whether one accepts the cosmology literally. The chooser arrives with formation. A person trained badly may choose badly. A person dominated by appetite may choose according to appetite. A person formed by status may choose prestige. A person trained philosophically may inspect more carefully. The chooser has a history. UTN sees a parallel with conditioning. Interpretation has history. Identity has history. Desire has history. Projection has history. Choice does not begin at the instant of decision. Where UTN departs sharply is in its metaphysics of death. Unified theistic naturalism proposes that the divine image does not need to return to the divine because it was never ultimately separated from the divine. Matter changes. Embodied participation changes. But the framework does not require a metaphysical distance that death must overcome. This claim is metaphysical. It should not be presented as established neuroscience. That distinction matters. Communificus requires observation to remain observation, science to remain science, and metaphysics to remain metaphysics. At the same time, embodied life remains fully significant. Pain matters, law matters, violence matters, grief matters, material absence matters. A metaphysics of non-duality cannot be used to erase the reality of human suffering. Conclusion. The conversation continues. Plato asked what justice is. The question carried him into almost every major structure of human life: education, reason, desire, power, knowledge, appearance, government, tyranny, death, the good. Unified theistic naturalism enters that conversation with one major addition: the conditioned mind. Plato asks what should govern the human being. UTN asks what the governing structure is carrying. Plato asks the philosopher to turn toward the good. UTN asks whether the one turning is carrying yesterday into the movement. Plato sees shadows. UTN asks what projector produced them. Plato sees tyranny as internal slavery. UTN asks what conditioned continuity makes captivity feel familiar. Plato elevates reason. UTN retains reason as indispensable, but does not allow it to become final authority simply because it is sophisticated. The deepest intersection remains the need for reference. Plato's good and UTN's unwavering line are not the same concept, but both emerge from the recognition that movement cannot become its own final measure. Unified theistic naturalism therefore proposes the unwavering line of the divine as a reference expressed through freedom, unconditional love, compassion, stillness, truthfulness, non-duality, and wholeness. Its final claim is not that Plato's inquiry should be replaced. It is that the inquiry remains unfinished. And perhaps that is the highest compliment philosophy can receive. A question survives. Another person sees something. The field widens. The conversation continues. 7 reflective questions. 1. When I call something just or unjust, what reference am I actually using? 2. If no one could punish me, praise me, condemn me, or even know what I had done, what would guide my action? 3. Can I distinguish reason functioning as an instrument from reason defending a conclusion I am already conditioned to protect? 4. What image am I currently responding to as though it were reality? An image of myself, another person, the future, love, justice, success, betrayal, or God? 5. What repeated pattern in my life can I observe clearly without turning that pattern into identity or destiny? 6. When I use the 7 attributes to evaluate movement, am I observing honestly or quietly using them to judge another person? 7. If Plato asked what actually governs my life, reason, desire, fear, memory, identity, habit, or communion, what evidence would I place on the table? For the reader who wants the longer walk, this white paper is intentionally condensed. For the complete engagement with all 10 books of Plato's Republic, including extended treatments of Thrasymachus, the Ring of Gyges, Guardian Education, Women and Political Function, the Philosopher-King, the Divided Line, the Form of the Good, the Cave, Political Degeneration, Tyranny, Poetry, the Myth of the Conditioned Mind, Triangulation, Center Frame, Communion, Perfect Action, Communificus, Justice, Death and the Divine Image. C. Dear Plato, after 21st centuries, the conversation is not over reopening the Republic, a unified theistic naturalism. Response to Justice, the Conditioned Mind, and the Search for the Good Patrick Carradine Unified Theistic Naturalism Publications 2026, DOI. 10. 5281 Zenodo.2206-074 Amazon edition. See Amazon link below when available. Canonical references Plato. Republic. Carradine, Patrick. Dear Plato, after 24 centuries, the conversation is not over. Reopening the Republic, a unified theistic naturalism response to justice, the conditioned mind, and the search for the good. Unified Theistic Naturalism Publications, 2026. DOI 105281 Zenodo.22060074 Carradine, Patrick. Principia Communio, Axioms and Laws of Unified Theistic Naturalism. 10.5281 Zenodo 17009966 Carradine, Patrick. Communificus, the foundational field of the study of participation in reality. Unified Theistic Naturalism Publications, 2026. DOI 10 5281 Zenodo.21459-718 Carradine, Patrick. Triangulation, the hidden geometry of conditioned movement. Unified Theistic Naturalism Publications, 2026. DOI 105281 Zenodo.2179857 Carradine, Patrick. 3/5 of Justice, the Constitution, the Conditioned Mind, and the Judgment Built into Reality. Unified Theistic Naturalism Publications, 2026. DOI 10.5281 Zenodo.21744869 Carradine, Patrick. The Side Effects of Communion, a comparative study of Stoicism and Unified Theistic Naturalism. Unified Theistic Naturalism Publications, 2026. DOI 10.5281 Zenodo.214600617 Carradine, Patrick. Time Travel. Unified Theistic Naturalism Publications, 2025. DOI 10.5281 Zenodo.169411623 Carradine, Patrick. The Day God Forgot to Create Sin. Unified Theistic Naturalism Publications, 2025. DOI 10.5281 Zenodo. 16915470. And just like that, we arrive, not at the end of Plato, but at a clearer view of the question he left behind. We began with justice and found ourselves looking at power, education, reason, the cave, the tyrant, the good, the conditioned mind, and the need for a reference that does not simply move with us. Plato saw extraordinarily far. And perhaps the most useful thing we can do with a thinker like Plato is not preserve him behind glass, but continue looking from where he stopped. The conversation remains open, and from here 3 more doorways appear. Doorway 1, Conflict. The Beauty and the Beast, a UTN framework for seeing the mentor hidden inside every menace. DOI 10.5281 Zenodo. 110.6.4.2492. What if conflict is not the enemy we have spent our lives trying to avoid, but a mirror revealing exactly what remains hidden inside us? Conflict. The Beauty in the Beast explores the moment when 2 histories, 2 interpretations, and 2 conditioned worlds collide. What looks like attack may actually be information. What feels like menace may be exposing attachment, memory, fear, or the need to control. Instead of asking how to defeat conflict, this paper asks a more revealing question. What is conflict showing you about what occupies center frame? The beauty inside the beast appears when conflict stops being treated as something that must be conquered and becomes an opportunity to see. The other person may unknowingly become a mentor, revealing where conditioning is still active and where communion has not yet replaced reaction. This exploration moves through oscillation, memory, timing, conditioned response, and the possibility of perfect action arising when resistance ends. If you have ever wondered why the same conflicts seem to return in different relationships, different places, and different forms, this doorway may change the way you see the beast entirely. Doorway 2, the majesty of now. Center frame and the collapse of psychological time, DOI. 10.5281, Zenodo 189-72576. What if the past and future possess only the authority we continue giving them in the present? The majesty of now enters the architecture of awareness itself through one of unified theistic naturalism's most important concepts. Center frame, a singular place of conscious occupation. The paper examines what happens when memory fills that frame as regret, identity, pain, or unfinished history, and when projection occupies it as fear, anticipation, expectation, or imagined futures. Psychological time begins to feel like reality, even though life itself is still unfolding only here. This doorway explores the possibility that presence does not need to be manufactured, practiced, or achieved. When psychological occupation subsides, something remarkably simple remains: the living movement of now. From there, resonant flow and perfect action become possible without rehearsal, internal argument, or constant correction. If you have ever felt exhausted by carrying yesterday into today or living inside a tomorrow that has not happened, the majesty of now invites you to examine whether the present was ever truly missing or merely occupied. Doorway 3. The 5 gold coins of the captive. Why humanity suffers, and how communion dissolves the coins, DOI. 10.5281 Zenodo. 19005960s across cultures, religions, philosophies, therapies, and generations, humanity keeps returning to the same fundamental burdens: suffering, death, identity, injustice, and love distorted into fear. Unified Theistic Naturalism calls them the 5 gold coins of the captive because nearly every framework humanity has built promises, in one way or another, to help us carry them, explain them, overcome them, redeem them, or finally escape them. Yet the coins repeatedly return. This paper asks whether the problem has been misunderstood from the beginning. Perhaps the answer is not another robe, another technique, another identity, another achievement, or another future state in which life finally becomes complete. Perhaps the deeper question is what happens when the hand holding the coins simply opens. The 5 gold coins of the captive explores communion as the place where the search for relief gives way to direct participation in what is already whole. If one of these coins has followed you through life, fear of loss, fear of death, the struggle to know who you are, the ache of injustice, or love tangled with attachment, this doorway opens into one of the central questions at the heart of unified theistic naturalism. Whichever doorway calls to you, I'll meet you there, and we'll see what we discover. I'm Patrick Carradine, and this is Unified Theistic Naturalism.